in El Salvador, Honduras, Guatemala, and Mexico. 18th Street has a rogues gallery of MA shot callers who influenced its operations, including Ruben Night Owl Castro, George Huero Caballo Gonzalez, Felipe Chispas Vivar, and Frank Puppet Martinez. Federal prosecutors say Puppet Martinez was receiving $40,000 a month in tax payments throughout most of the 90s, including 3 years he spent in Pelican Bay State Prison. Bruce Riordan, a former assistant U.S. attorney in Los Angeles who prosecuted Puppet, said 18th Streeters were running their drug operation like a McDonald's franchise. It was busy all day. The Columbia Little Cycles, one small clique of 18th Street that operated out of a tiny neighborhood in the MacArthur Park area, just west of downtown Los Angeles, netted about $250,000 a month for 8 years. 18th Street dealers were put on shifts so that drugs could be sold on the street 24 hours a day. The feds, during the RICO case, found that rent collectors were making $8 to $10 grand a week. Young up-and-coming gang members were raking in $1,000 a week for themselves. Anthony Coco Zaragoza, a workhorse hitman with 18 boldly tattooed on his face, was receiving nearly $300,000 a year while locked up in prison. Luis Lai, a former federal co-prosecutor in the case against the Little Cycles, said they patterned themselves after East Coast organized crime, and they relished the trappings. One gang shot caller living in a ritzy Burbank compound had a framed picture of actor Al Pacino as the Godfather hanging on the wall in his office. There were expensive lowrider show cars, SUVs, Mercedes-Benzes, fancy jewelry, jet skis, and costly helicopter rides. Prosecutors believe the Little Cycles were collecting about $4.5 million a year and washing the money through a couple of restaurants, a used car lot, and a juice bar. Gang accounting required that all the cash be marked so that the Mexican Mafia knew who was paying taxes. They ran it essentially like a corporation, explained former assistant U.S. Attorney Lai. Puppet Martinez, M.A. tatted on his chest, was at the top of the money chain. Prosecutor Lai explained that every decision went through him. Investigators said that while Puppet was in prison in 1994, he ordered the execution of a rival mafia associate who tried to move in on his territory. Carlos Truco Lopez and his aunt, Donatia Contreras, were ambushed with AK-47 machine guns and left for dead. FBI agents discovered that Puppet's wife, Janie Garcia, known as the Lady Boss or the Black Widow, had nearly $500,000 in cash stashed at 3 houses. The feds found $10,000 in a vacuum cleaner and another $40,000 stuffed in a duffel bag. Lefty Gonzalez, another tax collector, was executed in a pool hall after he disrespected the Black Widow by making a $10,000 payment in $1 bills. The hit team finished Lefty off with a close-up round in his mouth. Bruce Riordan left the Los Angeles U.S. Attorney's Office in January 2007 as Deputy Chief of the Organized Crime and Terrorism Section and accepted the new position of Gang Sergeant in L.A. County Attorney's Office. He joins other law enforcement gang experts in saying that operations such as the Little Cycles are being replicated by the dozens for sure, and that most, likely hundreds of Sureño street gangs are under the auspices of the Mexican Mafia. Riordan said Miami is the single most organized criminal enterprise in America today, and they represent the single greatest threat to the internal security of the nation because their power is derived from a chokehold on the prison system at the federal, state, and local levels. That power is growing rather than receding in the years since 9/11, when law enforcement took its eye off the ball. Emmett was battered and bruised in the late 1990s and into 2000-2001 on the verge of extinction. But law enforcement at every level left the field, and Emmett has undergone resurgence. Today, they are at the pinnacle of the crime pyramid in the USA. Since 2005, U.S. attorney prosecutions in Los Angeles have sent 41 members of the Violent Boys gang to prison as part of a federal racketeering investigation called Operation Silent Night. The average sentence ranged from 10 to 20 years in prison, with 15 defendants put away for more than 20 years and 5 for mandatory life. The Violent Boys case specifically linked the gang to 4 gangland murders, including the execution of a Burbank police officer and laid out a drug trafficking operation that spread from Hawaii to Indiana, Kentucky, North Carolina, and New Jersey under the watchful eye of Laeme's Michael Mosca Torres. The Vineland boys for years would buy a pound of meth for $7,000 and sell it in Hawaii for $25,000. Meanwhile, according to Rene Enriquez, Laeme's Anthony Tony Palacios has set up a drug operation in Hawaii. Gilberto Shotgun Sanchez has moved to Florida. Jaime Payaso Inoco is in Connecticut, and a new carnal known to Enriquez only as Mike was made in New York and is expected to establish a foothold there. Mexican mafia groups have also formed in Arizona and Texas. Around 1974, Hispanic inmates at Arizona State Prison formed a prison gang and named themselves La Familia. Shortly after, a few MA members from California got busted and ended up in the Arizona prison, where they schooled La Familia on how to get business done mafia style. La Familia was eventually endorsed by California MA and became the Arizona Mexican Mafia. About a decade later, some homegrown Arizona crooks wanted to be MA but didn't care for any affiliation with California. They started the New Mexican Mafia without the original MA's endorsement. The two groups are bitter enemies. The New Mexican Mafia staged a failed plot to kill the director of the Arizona Department of Corrections in 1998. In 2000, two new MA members were charged with killing the police officer during a botched robbery. By 2003, more than a dozen members of the New Mexican Mafia had been prosecuted by U.S. attorneys for dozens of crimes, including racketeering, drug dealing, money laundering, the execution of 8 prospective witnesses, and a plot to kill the Phoenix detective who worked the investigation. They were sentenced to the Federal Bureau of Prisons. Frank Marcel, Chief of Intelligence for the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, said it was anticipated that these members would be placed on a hit list once they set foot in the federal prison system because of the long-standing feud with the California allied Arizona MA. To the surprise of us in law enforcement corrections who monitor these groups, it appears that has not happened. All indications suggest a truce has been established between all Arizona Mexican Mafia factions, and they in turn have reached out to MA members in California and the federal prison system. This phenomenon is ominous. Imagine the consequences of all the Southwest states falling under the umbrella and direction of the California Mexican Mafia. As a criminal syndicate, they are unmatched, and it appears their power-hungry tentacles are reaching farther and farther. The Texas branch of the Mexican Mafia, called the Mexican Enemy, or LAEME, was formed in the mid-1980s. It also started in prison and has a constitution that describes the group as a criminal organization that works in any criminal aspect or interest for the benefit and advancement of the Mexican enemy. We shall deal in drugs, contract killings, prostitution, large-scale robbery, gambling, weapons, and everything imaginable. Federal indictments in 1993 and 1998 named more than 24 Mexicani, ranking gang members and associates in conspiracy that involved heroin, dirty money, guns, and 14 murders. Mexiconomy is not officially linked to California's Mexican Mafia. In the meantime, LAEME has been growing for years, mostly under the radar of national law enforcement, and it is a mob in search of a new criminal empire. Rene Enriquez confirmed law enforcement fears. Mafia commissioners in the federal system and leaders at Pelican Bay State Prison want to establish a treaty with Hispanic criminal organizations, i.e. Latin Kings back east, Texas Syndicate in the Midwest and Southwest, the West of Familia in Northern California, as well as already established factions of LAEME in Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas. The objective of the treaty would be to control distribution for all major cartels, as well as to expand each organization's influence to a national level rather than a regional level. In 5 to 10 years, you will see all of this come to fruition. This is the new domestic terrorism. The mafia is like a malignancy, slowly and quietly metastasizing and metamorphosizing. The Department of Justice estimates that there are 30,000 gangs in the United States with 800,000 members, having an impact on as many as 2,500 communities. Just about half of those gang members are of Hispanic descent. Rene Enriquez said that LAEME wants a piece of all their action. Chris Swecker, Assistant Director of the FBI's Criminal Investigative Division, told a congressional committee in 2005, gangs from California, particularly in the Los Angeles area, have a major influence on Mexican American and Central American gangs in this country and in Latin America. That comes as no news to members of La M. At the same time, law enforcement estimates put the number of Latino gang members in Southern California alone as high as 100,000 members. Arguably, the Mexican Mafia's black hand reaches out to all of those who call themselves sureños. It's a sizable army committed to wrongdoing, and there is irrefutable evidence that they are in fact moving throughout the country, infecting our population with drugs, death, and a diabolical sense of duty. Gang expert Richard Valdemar offered this insight. What we see in the Mexican Mafia is what the Italian Mafia was in the 1920s or 1930s. They're on their way to another place. Thank God most of them are heroin addicts. It keeps them from doing what they have the potential of doing. Rene Enriquez picked up on that same theme. I don't think the public understands the ramifications of what the Mexican Mafia has grown into, and right now, it's in its nascency. There is a big shift toward making guys who aren't lifers and do not use drugs. The organization is only 50 years old. Compare that to the Italian mob that has been around for hundreds of years. Brian Paru, a former special assistant to the Assistant Secretary of CDC and now a consultant, said, "M is the new La Cosa Nostra." The potential is frightening. There are no more than 150 to 300 made guys in La M, but in Southern California, their army of loyal Latino gang members numbers in the tens of thousands. La Cosa Nostra in the United States never had anything close to those numbers to build on. Los Angeles City gang czar Richard Riordan had more to say. Individual brothers of the Mexican Mafia wield power in the nation's prisons and on the streets that would make Tony Soprano blush. The Sopranos is merely an exercise in nostalgia. Today the real power is the Sureño Nation, and the Sureño Nation is ruled by La M. La Cosa Nostra has no influence in the nation's prisons, no influence in the Southwest, and no influence over the street gangs. La M has influence over all three and is using that power to take control of the nation's drug trade. La M calls the tune for the drug dealers in the Southwest, and the drug dealers dance to that tune. La Cosa Nostra left the drug trade to La M, and La M made the most of that decision.